Wait for it to turn 12:50. Okay. I'd like to call to order this assembly work session. It is Friday, July 9, 2021. We are noticed from 12:15 to 12:45. This is a confirmation hearing for Travis Frisk, Chief Fiscal Officer. And we'll go ahead and start with introductions.
Cameron Verdia, Forrest Lamar.
Peterson.
John Weddleton.
Jamie Allard. Crystal Kennedy.
Christopher Constant.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera. Travis Frisk.
Amy Domboski. Great, thanks. Welcome, everybody. Ms. Domboski, will you be introducing Mr. Frisk?
I would love to. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce to the Assembly and put before you our nominee for Chief Fiscal Officer. Mr. Frisk comes to us as a long-time Alaskan family, which I hope he tells you about, and also an impeccable record in the banking industry. He spent well over 20 years. He comes to us with a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience. So I hope you find your conversation today with him fruitful.
Thank you, Ms. Domboski.
Thank you, Amy.
Mr. Frisk, if you'd like to go ahead and further introduce yourself.
Madam Chair and Assembly members, I appreciate the opportunity to sit in front of you today. You have in front of you a resume on me, which basically just discusses my professional history. So let me give you a background of who I am and how I got here. So we'll start back with my mom and her family. They homesteaded in Anchorage in the early mid-1950s, pre-statehood. They were among three families, their family and three other families homesteaded east of Anchorage, which at that time they went out with the Bonifaces, the Turpins, and the Pacquiaos. They homesteaded an area that, if you know where East High School is, the S-curve was the back end of the parking lot of East High School and bordered by the road, which was a dirt road at that time, and the Russian Jack Park. So that low-lying area right there, which is now full of homes, was actually one homestead that my grandparents owned and was my playground as a kid growing up. So I came to Alaska in 1966. I was not born here, but my family members were. My older brother was born at the Providence Hospital on L Street. My sister was born at the New Providence Hospital, where it is, when it was just building B. I have a long history here in Alaska. I grew up on the east side of town. I'm not sure which one of your members has that section of town, but I grew up on DeBar Road, across from, at that time, DeBar Builder Supply. Nanaca Valley is where I grew up. I went to Nanaca Valley. I went to Clark Junior High School. I graduated east in 1982. I went to UAA, graduated in 91. You'll notice there's a pretty big gap in there. I spent 5 years right out of high school working for a local company, Action Locksmith, Bob Hinkie and Charlotte Hinkie, for 5 years before I went back to school. Again, graduated in 92, got married to my wife, who I've been married to 30 years this September, in 91. Have two children, a 27-year-old boy and a 21-year-old, soon to be 22-year-old daughter, who's a scholarship softball player at the University of Minnesota Crookston. I've spent 28 years in banking. All of my time has been spent with national caliber banks, being Bank of America, if you remember when they were here for a short pause time in the early 90s and sold out to Northrop. I was recruited away by KeyBank, spent 15 years at KeyBank, was recruited away to Wells Fargo, and then just spent the last basic 9 years at Wells Fargo. Unfortunately for me, I was caught up in a national-wide reduction in force that impacted 3,500 employees. I was one of 35 employees in the state of Alaska that lost our job at the end of November. So timing is everything, I suppose. Which really kind of brings me to right where I am now, because I was on a severance package. This opportunity had presented itself, and I put my name in the hat, my hat in the ring, whatever you want to say, and was lucky enough to convince the administration, incoming administration, to appoint me to this position.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frisk. Do members have any questions? Mr. Peterson and then Mr. Weddleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is sort of a personal question. Did you ever play any baseball in the Naca Valley Little League?
Great question, Assembly Member Peterson. Yes, I did. Actually, my grandmother, my uncles played there. And so I came through and played there afterwards. It's funny, the continuity of family back in that time frame, we all lived right next to each other. So 4 sisters lived within 3 blocks of each other. So I got to be able to hang with my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and such in that area at that time. So yes, I played baseball there. My shirt tail relative, my mom was remarried, my father passed away, so my mom's remarried. Her husband's son coached the Naca Valley Little League team that won the World Series, and my niece was on that.
Fantastic. Well, I just completed my 21st season coaching Little League baseball at so.
Great. I was there a little bit before that.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. So we have Mr. Weddleton next in the queue, followed by Mr. Perez-Verdia.
Yeah, so I have a question. I don't offer it as a criticism, but just surprise. Usually you think CFO is going to have a CPA, MBA, and a numbers person, and I see you more kind of sales management kind of position. So I mean, how's that mesh? What's your comfort level with pages and pages of
Financial statements.
financial statements?
It's a great question, Assemblymember Weddleton. Part of my job was to sift through 250, 300 page financial statements on major corporations in order to assess their ability to repay loans, to make sure that they weren't in violation of covenants, to ensure that there weren't opportunities inside those that would allow whatever institution I was working for at the time to help with deficiencies by refinancing, maybe looking at other alternatives that weren't thought of at that time. The sales part of it, banking is numbers driven, and it's always been about numbers. I just oversaw teams of anywhere from 5 to 15 people in which we all did basically the same thing. As you are probably aware, sales and sales goals in the Wells Fargo house went away quite a long time ago due to a scandal. I can tell you with certainty that it happened before I joined Wells Fargo. It never happened on my watch. It didn't happen in any of my teams. I did suffer the repercussions of fallout, but it is what it is.
That's fine. I have no problem with sales. I'm a retailer, so that aspect's just fine.
Thank you, Mr. Weddleton. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. I want to note for the record, we've been joined by Ms. Zelatel at 12:22. Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Hi. A few questions. If you could, in your own words, describe to us the role of the CFO. If you could sort of share with us what you think this position is all about.
Well, for me, when I first looked at it, I wasn't exactly sure what the role was. And as I dove into it more, I believe the role, and I apologize, great question, Assemblymember Verdia, sorry about that. The position is designed to safeguard and be a fiduciary for the fiscal responsibility of the municipality. Okay, what does that mean? That means it's my duty and responsibility is beyond just the mayor's office and the assembly members. My duty cascades down to every member of the public within this municipality. It's my job to safeguard the resources, whether they be hard assets, liquid assets, revenue streams, expense controls. All of that falls under this. The job I'm going to do is rely heavily on the team that's already in place. That's a phenomenal team to start with. And utilize their expertise in their areas, whether it be Dan Morris in Treasury or Ross in public finance and investment. Their expertise is phenomenal. They are very capable of doing the jobs they're doing. And my job is to help them in any way, shape, or form I can. My job is also to report to you folks to let you know where we're at, how we're doing, if we can do projects that are being requested or reviewed, and what method of how we're going to fund them, whether they be utilizing existing funds, going to the market looking for short-term funds, or going long-term with notes and bonds. So that, I hope, answers your question.
Yeah, I just a couple more. One of the things I'm curious about is we've heard consistently that many of our departments are struggling to meet the needs of our community and to do the job that they've been tasked to do because of lack of funds, because of lack of staff, because of a variety of things. Yet the new administration has come in and said that there is an intent on cutting, on reducing where they can. Can you just talk about sort of your role in that, in terms of what you just said, utilizing what is currently in place, yet at the same time coming in with a mandate to look at reduction?
Another great question. Assemblymember Verdia, I'm not sure if I would call it reduction. I more can call it efficiencies. There are certain events already in motion that will help create efficiencies for not only this administration, but also the municipality. What we're talking software upgrades that will allow us to, instead of having one individual sit and work on one project all year at $80,000, that the computer system upgrades that are in place now will potentially eliminate that need and necessarily move that resource to another area and such. So it's also efficiencies. Yes, we have been asked to review our staffing and such. At this time, I have asked that. I don't have all the information back from my department heads at this time, but I know for a fact that we have at least 8 open positions as we sit here today. Will we replace, will we fill them? Possibly. We're gonna look at every single one on a case-by-case basis. The big thing for me is that you can tax people and you can look for revenue streams, but if you don't have the resources or the individuals to actually make sure you get paid, then you got an accounts receivable that's just sitting there and doing you nothing.
Right. This is my last question is just, can you just speak to the size and the complexity of this business that you're walking into, the municipality, and how it compares to your past experience? Is this have you had experience leading such a large and complex and diverse group?
Another great question, Assemblymember Verdia. I need to be careful with my comments and my discussion at this particular point in time due to confidentiality to the clients that I've worked with in the past. I do not want to. I will not specifically name names. I hope you understand that. I wouldn't do that to you in a public forum. I'm not going to do that to them. But I can tell you that I've worked with major corporations that have $1 billion a year revenue streams and have multiple entities that roll up through a predominant entity, 58 subgroups underneath them and such, which goes back to Assemblymember Welton's question about reviewing financial statements that are 300 pages long because you got so many subs that work under that. Yes, I am comfortable with this. The assets under management currently of this municipality, one of my family relationships that I had was similar in size. I've had the ability to grow one of the businesses from 0 to $750 million of assets under management when I left. So this is not significantly outside of my wheelhouse. Comfortable with these numbers, I know how to manage it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Verdia. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. Next in the queue, we have Ms. Zalatel, followed by Mr. Constant, and then Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Mr. Frisk. So my question is this, this is a job of public service, and one thing our former CFO used to do that knocked my socks off every time is when a member from the public would ask a question about the finances of the municipality, he would come off the dais, hand off his business card, and work with that person to better understand the finances and how the municipality operates, because it's complex. What would your approach to the public be, particularly about understanding kind of complex revenue, operations, why we do what we do? I will also say, he also would joyfully always go and grab the checks provided that were payment in lieu of taxes with a giant smile. So there's something fun to look forward to. But, there's a really public facing portion to this job as CFO. And I think it's a terribly important role. So I'd like to hear a little bit about what you might view your approach to the public is, and how you can help explain the finances of the municipality.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember. Is it Zalatel?
It's Zalatel.
Zalatel, apologize. I'll try not to.
It's okay, no problem.
The irony is that I knew Alex Lefka. I've known Alex Lefka for 25 years. We have a shared bond between the two of us in family matters. So not that we're related. But being, you folks asked Chief Schrage about customer service earlier. And I loved his answer. And I've always, to myself, been in a service-related industry in the financial business. And I've always prided myself on taking, and I'm going to step back and engage here, the Nordstrom's approach to customer service, which was above and beyond and blow their socks off. So if that meant that I needed to spend 5 minutes or 5 hours with a constituent that needs to understand how the gas tax impacts the tax on your property, and we'll have that discussion. I can educate, I will educate if necessary and when asked. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem working with anybody. That's expected, I would say.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Zalatel. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. So next we have Mr. Constant, followed by Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you. Welcome. And this is probably, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, it might spark a response. Certification of funds. This is one of the primary functions of the CFO, OMB, and the process by which funds are certified. It has been the practice at some points in the past where some administrations believe that the certification of funds to an assembly proposal is somehow subjective, meaning they can make a determination of whether or not it's worthy of proceeding forward with certification of funds based on any number of administration priorities. But instead, if you read the code, it's clearly a ministerial duty, the certification of funds, not a political duty. And so my question is, have you had a conversation about the certification of funds? Because when an assembly initiative comes forward that we want to fund, the certification of funds is we have to show that the funds are in fact available and unencumbered. And so, but that sometimes in the past has become a political football. I want to hear a conversation about that.
Appreciate the question, Assemblymember Constant. There has been no direction to me to do anything other than certify funds. I've made this comment and I'll make it again. The nice thing about money is it's the color green. It's not red, it's not blue, it's green. If you want to know if there's money there, it's my job to tell you if it's there. My job is to work collaboratively with this group, with the mayor, and give you the information that you're requesting. And the numbers are the numbers. They don't lie, and I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. So next we have Mr. Dunbar and then Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have two questions. One is more serious and sort of, I think, more impactful. The other one is just something I'm curious about. Will not impact my vote. So the first one, the more serious one is, one of the sort of prizes of the municipality is our excellent bond rating. And so I'm wondering, what risks do you see to that bond rating coming down the pike? And how would you anticipate we could deal with those kind of risks?
Great question, Assemblymember Dunbar. So obviously we've had an excellent bond rating, and our goal is to continue to have that excellent rating. I have not seen the 2020 numbers as far as the financial impact of how COVID has impacted us from a revenue stream. I know we got CARES Fund money and such. I haven't seen the numbers. That report is not scheduled to come back out from our accountant firm BDO until first week of August. Me being the layperson that I am, not seeing the numbers, I'm gonna sit here and tell you that based on what I've seen happen to this city and this state, our travel industry was just gutted, which is gonna have an absolute impact on on your bed tax numbers. It's gonna have an impact on your gas tax. It's also gonna have an impact on your alcohol tax. I mean, you're looking at tourism coming in, renting motorhomes and such. We've seen, and it's unique to me, but we've seen car rental places that have no inventory, okay, for various reasons. So taxes collected on businesses for their inventories and such, it's gonna be impacted. How they're gonna balance out, not 100% sure. I don't know the numbers at this time. I mean, that's the best I can tell you. We're not the only ones that are in this boat. What will help us, in my opinion, more than other municipalities of our size throughout the United States is the fact that ML&P money has hit our balance sheet will help us buoy through any shortfall we have in revenue streams at this time. And again, I'm not sure how they equate. Are we down 100 million, down 10 million, up where we're at? I don't know the number at this time, but I know that with the impact coming in, the retirement of debt, the liquidity event, that should help us maintain our specific higher bond rating.
Thank you. And my second question, again, this is just because I'm curious. So I think you're a pretty prominent member of the hockey community. And I have, in the last year or so, I've heard some interesting proposals about management of Ben Boki and maybe trying to hand it over to a private entity or something like that. Do you have any thoughts on that? You'll be part of the sort of leadership team. It won't be directly under you, but you'll be part of the overall leadership team of the city. Do you have any thoughts on our hockey facilities?
I haven't seen the proposal for the turning over the municipal facilities. I haven't seen anything.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they exist. It was just an idea that's been floated to me.
I've heard it. I haven't done a deep dive into it. I haven't talked to anybody other than one individual that said, hey, we want to do this. Okay. So that's about the extent of the conversation. Can they do the job? I'm not sure. Right now we're under contract with it's not SMG anymore. Whatever it's AMS or the former SMG, we're still under contract at this time. So that's a competitive bid process. See what happens.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. Mr. Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Constant asked one of my questions because very recently, fund certification was a little bit of an issue. But I'm wondering about some of your thoughts on some of the funds that the municipality manages. So as you know, we have the municipal trust, and we recently put in a lot of money into that trust through the sale of MLP. Generally, do you have experience sort of managing these types of funds? And then second, one of the funds that you are going to be working closely with is the 49th State Angel Fund. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas or thoughts of direction that you'd want to take that fund in.
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Rivera. Let's start with the first one. So the trust that you're talking about is, and unless I'm missed the boat on this one, which I don't think I have, is actually managed by professional managers that have been vetted through a process. And their job is to manage and take care of our money the way we've instructed them through our investment policy statement, which if I'm still not mistaken was adopted in September of 2020, which was preceding the MLP proceeds coming in, which was very smart to revisit it right before you're dropping a bunch of money. To my knowledge, at this time, from the reports I've seen, the people that are managing, there's different fund managers, they're doing their job. And that's what we expect. We expect them to beat benchmarks net of fees. And at this particular point, according to Ross and his summary to me, when I asked the question that you just asked me, they're beating the benchmarks. And they're not just a little bit, but they're beating them by 1 or 2%, which is what we want. So we've hired the right people at this particular point in time. And I apologize, you asked 2 questions. The second question?
Sure, so the second one was around the 49th state.
49th state, yes. Actually, we're gonna have a success story that's gonna be on the agenda for some appropriation of money going back into certain funds, and then one of them is the 49th State Fund, Angel Fund, where we had an early investment into a venture that has since paid out, and now we're putting money back in. Erin and her team are doing a phenomenal job. They're deploying money at a reasonable timing and rate, given the significance of what we've just come through. So to expect them to have deployed money in 2020 frequently would be, it's not a good fit.
So is there any particular sort of direction or ideas that you have for the 49th State Angel Fund that you think you'll be implementing?
Well, I want to make sure that the fund is available to any and all applicants that want to utilize that fund. It's an equity match as long as it pencils out properly. We're not just going to give money away just because somebody asks us for it. It's going to have to make business sense, in my opinion. That is the direction that we should take with this. We need to do what's right, but we also, again, being fiduciaries back to the municipality and the way this is set up, we need to safeguard and protect that money as well. My job, and to Assemblymember Perez Verdia's previous question that I want to expand on, I'm in risk management, in all honesty. My job is to help you manage the risk associated with all the money and all the revenue streams coming into Anchorage.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rivera. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. We have Mr. Constance and then Ms. Delazar.
I've already gone once, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, are you one in the queue? Okay, we'll go to Ms. Kennedy and then Mr. Constance and then Ms. Delazar. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
My question, I appreciate the focus on risk management. So this kind of takes off from that, and that has to do with audits. Can you kind of explain what your philosophy is on when you call an audit on something? What are red flags for you? And at what point do you turn things over, maybe just through your office, you're looking through things, or maybe you turn it over to the internal auditors in the municipality, or maybe you get a third party? So can you talk a little bit about how you address the potential need for audit?
Thank you for the question, Assemblymember Kennedy. Audits are a necessary evil. I mean, they're not comfortable. You have to understand, as a business department head or a business leader, that you have to be able to, at any given time, look at your financials and determine if there's something out of whack, out of balance. And if it is, and if you start doing not a deep dive, but a dive to try to figure out what is going on. And it could be something as simple as, after a cursory look, this doesn't look right, I need somebody else to take a look at this. So bring in the internal and escalate as necessary to an external at that point. Prefer to look at it internally inside the department first to see if we can figure out what's going on or not, then engage the internal audit division inside the municipality, and then if necessary, go to a third party at that time.
Appreciate that, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. Mr. Constant?
So this one may too be, maybe not a question, but maybe a question in there. In the last 4 months, there was an issue that arose in the management of the Anchorage Community Development Authority. And as a member of the administration, the CFO and the Community and Economic Development Director tend to have a seat on that board, not just an ex officio seat, but an actual voting seat. Where the previous mayor seemed to have made a financial commitment to ACDA for projects and for sustainability that the ACDA board seemed to take as an actual commitment. But the appropriators of funding of the municipality are the assembly, not the mayor, and certainly not a couple of members who are ex officio, or not who are on that board and also represent the municipality in a confirmed appointed position. And so I'm hopeful that in your work with ACDA, you can be very careful in expressing if the interest is on behalf of the mayor, great, and you still have to come to the assembly if there's a financial commitment being made. Because that ended up with a real conflict in the community between personalities, and that made projects that were viable, less viable because of just kind of a failure to close the loop. And so I want to put that on the table as a concern.
I appreciate that, Assemblymember Constant. I can tell you from my background of banking, one of the things that we do when we negotiate with clients is that we always caveat to subject to final approval. And this would be a similar situation, in my opinion, that there is an interest to do business, but it's subject to final approval, which final approval is assembly approval at that point. So I don't have a problem. I appreciate the background and the history that goes with that. And yes, I will be careful to ensure that as a member of this team, that my words won't be considered even remotely a commitment to do anything without the appropriate approval process being vetted.
Thanks. And in fact, in the end, what happened is the project was approved, but not until after much unnecessary pain.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. And we are running a few minutes late for our next confirmation hearing. We'll go to Ms. Zelatel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Rivera's question about the Angel Fund actually reminded me of a question I wanted to ask, which is, we recently hired a chief equity officer, and I think one of the ways you can achieve equity is in how you spend your money. What partnership or collaboration do you think you could engage in with the chief equity officer to ensure that the municipality's expenditures are done in an equitable fashion?
I appreciate the question, Assemblymember Zeltel.
Thank you.
Did I do it right? Great. Be honest with you, I haven't considered that at this particular point in time. We've been on the job 7 days at this point, and coming up to speed with specific projects and everything that was going on with drinking from a fire hose fully loaded and open. It's going to take a little bit of time. Not that it's a very valid point to engage the equity officer in order to make sure that we're doing it in an equitable fashion. I want to hesitate for a second though, and go back to like Chief Shiragi said, sometimes equitable doesn't mean financial responsibility. It just, we need to make sure that whatever projects that we're being involved in are financially solid and sound. The the equity of how it's dispersed, I think it'll be pretty simple to do, but it all comes back to the project itself. And is it a viable project? So I'm not 100% sure that you can just throw a blanket and say, let's be equitable to all, because some projects are just not there. That makes sense. But if they're worthy projects, then it should be equitable to all, and everybody should have an opportunity at the fund.
Thank you, Ms. Alentel. Thank you, Mr. Frisk. Do members have any questions, other questions about finances or other sports?
Other sports.
We've talked about hockey and baseball
And softball.
and football.
My question
Mr.
is
Frisk, would
softball.
you like to add anything else?
I would just like to take the opportunity to say thank you again for sitting here and answering the questions on the list. And I look forward to working with all of you. And I have an open door, so give me a call, walk in the office, however we want it. And Madam Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Frisk, for your time. Appreciate you being here. And just as a reminder, Mr. Frisk's confirmation will be up on Tuesday's meeting, July 13, for AM 459, 2021. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and adjourn this work session and get started with the next one. Thank you all for being here. We are adjourned.